There's a question that quietly keeps people up at night, especially if you're retired or getting close. And it sounds simple, but it carries a lot of weight. Do I actually have enough money to last the rest of my life? Because here's the truth, you don't get a second shot at retirement. You don't get to run out of money at 82 and say, let me try that again. So when people hear about something called the 4% rule, they latch onto it like it's a guarantee, like it's a promise, like it's a safe number. But is it? Let's slow down and really talk about this because if you misunderstand this rule, it can cost you everything. The 4% rule sounds almost too simple. You take your total retirement savings, and in your first year of retirement, you withdraw 4% of that amount. Then every year after that, you adjust that withdrawal for inflation. That's it. That's the rule. So let's say you have $1 million saved. According to the rule, you take out $40,000 in your first year. Next year, maybe you take out $41,200 if inflation is 3%, and you keep going like that. Now, on paper, this rule was designed to make your money last for about 30 years. And for a lot of people, that sounds reasonable. But here's what you need to understand. This rule was never meant to be a guarantee. It was based on historical data, and it assumes a very specific kind of market behavior. And life doesn't follow neat historical averages. So let me ask you a question. What happens if the market drops right after you retire? Because that's not a theory, that's reality for many people. If you retire and then the market drops 20% or 30%, and you're still pulling out your 4% every year, you're not just withdrawing money, you're locking in losses. And that can create something called sequence of returns risk. And this is one of the biggest dangers no one talks about enough. Sequence of returns risk means the timing of your investment returns matters just as much, if not more, than the average return itself. If you get bad returns early in retirement, your portfolio can take a hit that it never fully recovers from, even if the market does well later. So suddenly, that safe 4% rule doesn't feel so safe anymore. Now let's talk about something else. People are living longer, much longer. The original studies behind the 4% rule assumed a 30-year retirement. But what if you retire at 60 and live to 95? That's 35 years. What if you live to 100? That's 40 years. And I want you to hear me clearly. Running out of money at 85 is not a small problem. That is a crisis. Because at that stage of life, you're not going back to work, you're not taking risks, you're depending on what you have left. And if that's not enough, the stress, the fear, the loss of independence, that's real. So now the question becomes, is 4% too much? For some people, yes. In today's world, with lower expected market returns and higher inflation uncertainty, many financial experts are actually suggesting a safer withdrawal rate might be closer to 3% or 3.5%. Now, I know what you're thinking. That means I need more money saved. Yes, that's exactly what it means. Or it means you need to adjust your expectations. Because retirement is not just about numbers, it's about lifestyle, it's about choices, it's about understanding what you can afford and what you can't. Let's make this practical. If you have $500,000 saved, the 4% rule gives you $20,000 a year. That's before taxes, before unexpected medical costs, before helping family members, before anything goes wrong. Is that enough for you to live on comfortably? For many people, the answer is no. And this is where people get into trouble. They assume the rule will carry them. Instead of asking the harder question, what kind of life do I actually want in retirement? And what will it realistically cost me? Because the biggest mistake you can make is building your retirement around a formula instead of a plan. Now, let's talk about fear, because underneath all of this, that's really what's driving the conversation. The fear of running out of money, the fear of becoming dependent on others, the fear of not being able to handle a health emergency, the fear of losing control. And those fears are valid. They're not something to ignore, they're something to plan for. So, what do? Instead of blindly trusting the 4% rule, first, you need flexibility. The 4% rule assumes you withdraw the same inflation adjusted amount every year, no matter what. But real life doesn't work like that. Markets go up, markets go down, expenses change. So instead of a fixed withdrawal, consider a dynamic strategy. In years when the market is down, you pull back a little. In years when it's up, you give yourself a bit more room. That one adjustment alone can significantly extend the life of your portfolio. Second, you need a cushion. This means having a portion of your money in safer, more stable assets, cash, short-term bonds, so you're not forced to sell investments when the market is down. Think of it as your financial shock absorber. If the market drops, you live off your cushion for a while, you give your investments time to recover, you don't panic, you don't lock in losses. That's how you protect yourself. Third, you need to think about guaranteed income. And this is where things like Social Security or pensions, if you have them, become incredibly important. Because every dollar of guaranteed income is one less dollar you need to pull from your investments. And for some people, adding an annuity, if it's the right kind and structured properly, can provide additional stability. Not for everyone, but for some, it can help reduce that fear of outliving your money. Fourth, you need to be honest about your spending. Not what you hope you'll spend, not what you think sounds reasonable, but what you actually spend. Track it, look at it, understand it, because you cannot build a sustainable retirement on guesswork. And finally, you need to accept that retirement planning is not a one-time decision. It's ongoing. You revisit it, you adjust it, you respond to what's happening in your life and in the market. The people who succeed in retirement are not the ones who follow a rule blindly. They're the ones who stay engaged, who stay informed, who are willing to make changes when needed. So let me bring this back to the original question. Can you actually retire on the 4% rule? The answer is it depends. It depends on your savings. It depends on your lifestyle. It depends on when you retire. It depends on how long you live. It depends on market conditions. And most importantly, it depends on how flexible and prepared you are. The 4% rule is not a guarantee. It's a guideline, a starting point, and if you treat it like anything more than that, you're putting yourself at risk. So here's your actionable takeaway. Don't build your retirement around a single number. Instead, build it around a strategy. Know your expenses, create flexibility in your withdrawals, maintain a safety cushion, secure reliable income streams, and most importantly, stay involved in your plan. Because your retirement is not just about surviving, it's about living. But living without financial fear requires clarity, discipline, and a willingness to face reality, not hide from it. And if you can do that, then whether it's 4%, 3.5%, or something else entirely, you'll be in control. And that's what really matters.